Right now, jazzed as hell to introduce to you from the top, Josh Kaul, Attorney General from the great state of Wisconsin. Josh, welcome to the Dom Salvia Show.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
It's a pleasure, Josh. Appreciate you making the time today. Obviously, the issue of the day, and there is breaking news on this, the administration's executive order that Trump signed, basically doing away with, by the executive order, birthright citizenship. The breaking news, federal judge today issued a 2-week restraining order striking that down. So that is where we stand right now. And this is one of many lawsuits out there. And Josh, you have involved Wisconsin in one of the many lawsuits. Let's start at the beginning, if you would, please, sir. What was the executive order? What was it intended to do? And why do you think it's problematic and unconstitutional?
Yeah, so first of all, on Donald Trump's first day in office, he signed a number of executive orders, and one of them purported to end birthright citizenship for some kids. So these are certain kids who are born in the United States, and Trump was trying to deny them citizenship. The problem with that is, first of all, the U.S. Constitution very clearly says that if you're born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, that you're a U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
There's also U.S. Supreme Court precedent that goes back more than 100 years directly on this issue. And on top of that, there's federal law that makes clear that kids who are born in this country are U.S. citizens. And so this is clearly an unconstitutional action. The court in Washington State, the federal court there today, said that this action was blatantly unconstitutional. And so on the first day in office, the new president was blatantly violating the U.S. Constitution. So we have stepped in, along with a number of other states, to protect the rights of kids who are born in our state and thereby are Wisconsin citizens.
Folks, you're listening to the Dom Salvia Show. Josh Kaul, Attorney General from the great state of Wisconsin, joining us along with Earl Ingram as well. Josh, what I didn't understand, and the logic, and my understanding, this was brought up during the discussion today. If a person is not subject to the jurisdiction of this country, and therefore how could the federal government prosecute them or state government prosecute them? It seems asinine on its face, sir.
Yeah, it's an incredibly narrow exception, and courts have actually weighed in on what this means. But for example, if you are a foreign diplomat in the country and you have diplomatic immunity, that would be an example of somebody who's not subject to the jurisdiction. It's a very narrow category.
Right.
It does not apply to kids who are born in the United States under circumstances other than those very rare circumstances. And so this is not a serious argument. The other thing is, these kinds of arguments have been made before and they've been rejected. So What we have is the Trump administration directing federal agencies, and that in turn means state agencies have to take action, to do something that has been established to be unconstitutional. And that's not at all what our president should be doing. He just took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, and here he is on his first day in office violating it.
Not surprisingly, unfortunately. Attorney General Kaul, my understanding there was a late filing on Wednesday from the Trump administration challenging whether or not the states have standing. What's your thought on that?
Well, this has big impacts on states. This is an argument we see in a lot of cases, but and we laid this out in the case that we're involved in. It also came up in this case in Washington. But there are a number of things that states have to do to comply with this order if it's put into effect. So, for example, right now when there's a child born in Wisconsin, we know that that's a U.S. citizen. But if this order that the Trump administration put in place were to go into effect, there would have to be an apparatus set up for making that determination on a case-by-case basis. It would also potentially impact federal funding of programs. So there's a real impact on the states. The court in Washington obviously didn't find that issue to be much of a concern. And I'm very optimistic that we will both win on standing and ultimately win this case.
Josh Kaul, Attorney General from the great state of Wisconsin. Josh, what about the state's role in immigration policy? And I asked that question in the context of a 3-page Justice Department memo that apparently started circulating yesterday, saying that if the local and state officials don't assist, that the federal DOJ is going to go after them. What, sir? You're the head LEO here in the state of Wisconsin. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first, I think with this new administration, it's important to separate out what's real from what's just a scare tactic or what's bluster. And I think that this new memo falls into the later category. The reality is, first of all, that state and local officials all over the country follow the law and comply with the law. At the same time, we have a role to play in stepping up to protect people's rights. And our system is based on the idea that states are their own sovereigns and they have a right to take action. That's a long established tradition in the United States. And the Trump administration is trying to run over that. Again, the Constitution has set up this system and the Trump administration is disregarding it. And it's important to note that all this stuff is happening in the context of the pardons that were issued on the first day that Trump had in office. Over 1,500 people associated with January 6th were pardoned. And that includes people who engaged in violent activities. A few of them received terrorism enhancements in their sentences. And what Donald Trump did is he sided with people convicted of crimes over the police officers who were the victims of those crimes. So again, it's a complete disrespect for the rule of law in our system of government. It's a really disastrous first week that the Trump administration has had.
Folks, you're listening to the Dom Salvia Show. Attorney General Josh Kaul joining us this segment. Just a practical matter, and I want to get to the pardons in just a moment. Help me understand, help our audience understand why all the different separate lawsuits. I mean, every state could have done one. Wisconsin joined on one. The one that the federal judge in Seattle ruled on today was from 4 other states. What's the strategy or theory behind that, Josh?
Well, we work very well with other AGs around the country, and in a lot of cases, we do that in a bipartisan fashion. So, for example, when we work to hold opioid companies accountable, and work that's still ongoing, by the way, we have worked across the aisle in a bipartisan fashion. But in other issues where there's a partisan divide, like there has been with Birthright Citizenship, we work together with other Democratic AGs. And so that's what's happened here. Now, as you can imagine, there are a lot of states in the country, and we don't all agree necessarily in every case on strategy or approach. And so it's not uncommon for there to be more than one suit going on. I believe there are also there's at least one other case that was brought by a nonprofit group. So it's not unusual. And what tends to happen is either courts will rule consistently, and that will sort of resolve the issue, or in an issue that either the courts disagree on or that's of sufficiently high profile that the Supreme Court wants to get involved, the U.S. Supreme Court ultimately resolves the issue, and that governs for all the cases. So we'll see which case proceeds the quickest here, but we feel good about the case we're a part of, and I'm optimistic we'll be successful.
So good afternoon, Attorney General Kaul. How are you?
Good afternoon.
Yeah, it's good to hear your voice again. But I guess what I'd like to ask you is Donald Trump freelancing? I mean, all of these, he has attorneys around him who understand the implications of the decisions that he's making. Or is it that there are gray areas and the attorneys that he has with him are going to challenge these gray areas that you and others know are not gray areas, but a misunderstanding on their issues? Do you think he's doing these things on his own?
No, I think that this is a part of a very carefully laid out strategy. Now, the Trump administration had a lot of time to think about what it was going to be doing when it came into office. And, one thing we've seen with Donald Trump throughout his career is that he has gotten really his entire party to back down and get behind him on whatever issue it is he's addressing. And I think we're seeing a similar effort here. We've seen it with these CEOs of tech companies who are all of a sudden making these huge donations to the inaugural and then showed up at the inauguration. We've seen some concerning self-censorship from the press. And I think this is consistent with that. It's an effort to get the courts or policymakers to back down. And we see that with these threats that are being made in this DOJ memo. But here's the thing. People are not going to back down. People are going to stand up for the rights of, in my case, of Wisconsinites, and in the case of my colleagues in other states, the rights of the people in their states. and we're going to ensure that our Constitution is protected and the rights of Americans are upheld.
Folks, you're listening to the Dom Salvia Show. Attorney General Josh Kaul for about 60 more seconds. Josh, with regards to the pardon, as the top law enforcement officer in the state of Wisconsin, officers have come from all sorts of political stripes, and they put themselves on the line. And to see this reaction from Donald Trump to pardon even the most violent of criminals and put these folks back out on the street, have you talked to regular law enforcement officers, and what's their reaction been?
Well, it's interesting. There are a lot of folks out there who normally back Trump who've been critical, including some Republican members of Congress in Wisconsin who've said this went too far. I believe there was a police union that recently came out and criticized this. But you've got Donald Trump opening the jailhouse doors here with people who, in some cases, were convicted of violent crimes to side with them over the police. It's disgraceful.
Absolutely disgraceful. Josh Kaul, Attorney General from the great state of Wisconsin, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for standing up to Donald Trump and for the Constitution. They used to call them, the Republican Party would be proud to be called the party of law and order. I like to think they're the party of assault and battery these days. Josh, thank you so much. We'll look forward to speaking to you real soon.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, folks.